First, check your cutter's blade for damage. Next, shorten and lock the blade. Angle the blade away from your body and keep your fingers away from the blade. Maintain a firm grip on the handle of the utility knife. Flip the box around and start cutting at the top. Begin cutting again on the other side. Return the blade to its hidden lock position.
I mentioned this before in a previous episode of Why This Scene, but Breaking Bad really has no shortage of iconic or shocking moments. With Why This Scene, I'm aiming for the most part to analyze scenes that I feel get overlooked in favor of some of the more action-packed ones, like I did with Mike Ehrmantraut's Half Measures monologue in my previous video. Another scene that I believe fits this category is when Gus Fring kills Victor in the lab with a box cutter in the premiere of Season 4, aptly titled Box Cutter. For some brief context, at the end of Season 3, Gus has decided to replace Walter with Gale as his cook, and is likely going to kill Walter as he no longer has a use for him. To save himself, Walter convinces Jesse that their only option is to kill Gale, because then Gus will be forced to keep Walter alive, since he's the only other person who can cook meth as pure as Gus wants it. In the Season 3 finale, Walter is cornered and about to be killed by Mike, before Walter reveals that he knows where Jesse is and can lead them to him. Mike then allows Walter to make a phone call to Jesse. Not very full measure of you there, Mike. Which Walt uses to tell Jesse that it needs to be him that kills Gale, and he has to do it now. Jesse then goes to Gale's apartment and shoots him point blank. Victor, one of Gus's henchmen, is then seen at Gale's apartment by a witness, which makes him yet another liability to Gus's operation. In the opening of Season 4, we see Gus arrive at the lab where Mike and Victor are holding Walter and Jesse. Gus's arrival, and what follows, is the scene that I will be discussing in this analysis. I'm going to let the whole scene play out as is, and then discuss the choices the writers and production staff made, what it says about the characters, and why this scene is so impactful.
Without us, without Jesse and myself, you have no one to make your product. Certainly not him. This person doesn't know what the hell he's doing.
Been watching him for weeks. Know every step to his cook.
Oh! Do you really? You... Really? Oh, so please, tell me. Catalytic hydrogenation, is it protic or aprotic? Because I forget. And if our reduction is not stereospecific, then how can our product be enantiomerically pure? I mean, is one phenyl, one hydroxy, 2-methylaminopropane, containing, of course, chiral centers at carbons number 1 and 2 on the propane chain. Then reduction to methamphetamine eliminates... Which chiral center is it again? Because I forgot. Come on. Help me out, Professor! Gus. We're here, come on. Let us work.
All his bullshit aside, it's called a cook. Because everything comes down to following a recipe. Simple, complicated, it doesn't matter. Steps never change. And I know every step.
Oh, is that what you want? This short order cook? You're not flipping hamburgers here, pal. What happens when you get a bad barrel of precursor? How would you even know it? And what happens in the summer when the humidity rises and your product goes cloudy? How would you guard against that, huh? Gus, you do this. All you'll have left is an $8 million hole in the ground. This lab. This equipment is useless without us, without Jesse and myself. You have no new product. You have no income. Your people up there will not be paid. Your distribution chain collapses. Without us, you have nothing. You kill me, you have nothing. You kill Jesse, you don't have me. You won't do this. You're too smart. You can't afford to do this. Please, let us just go back to work. We're here. Let us work. We're ready to go to work. We'll just pick up right where we left off.
There are so many interesting character moments and dynamics going on in this scene. For starters, with Walt, he spends almost the entire scene trying to talk his way out of what he thinks is going to be his death. We see so many times in this show that when he's faced with any situation, that his greatest weapon is his words, his ability to manipulate people into doing, acting, or behaving in the way that he needs and wants. While this doesn't really work on Gus at all, there is some truth to what he's saying here. A chemist on the level of Walt or Gale with a willingness to engage in an illegal business doesn't just fall out of the sky. He does need Walt now that Gale is dead, but that's not what's important to Gus here right now. It is that Walter has gotten too far out of line and doesn't know his place. This is why Gus sees it fit to show Walt in an immensely brutal and violent way why he should fall in line. Then there's Mike, who at this point is just furious with Walter and all of the chaos he brings. He legitimately stares down Walter with anger and disgust the entire time he is rambling on and on. It's so hilarious just how done Mike is with Walter here, even sitting him back down in his chair when Walt tries to stand up and take control. This makes total sense for Mike's character, though, as he is someone who attempts to maintain some kind of order in all of the chaos of the drug business, and Walter is pure chaos incarnate. Mike is also likely mad at himself for allowing Walter to get one over on him. Mike has realized at this point what a snake Walter is, and now gets to see the bullshit he spins on full display with a fresh set of eyes. He is also confused about what Gus is doing here. I'll be delving deeper into this later, but Mike has no idea why Gus has come down here and has begun to put on a hazmat suit. We see him take his eyes off Walter for a moment with a confused look across his face. Jesse seems to have this completely blank expression across his face, just staring at the ground and kind of slouched in his chair. There are two ways that I feel this could be interpreted, with the first being that he fully believes that this is it for him, and he's going to die. The second is that murdering Gale is still so fresh in his mind that he's shaken up by having to commit such an awful act. I'm convinced it's a bit of both, leaning more towards the guilt over the murder. He seems to just be completely removed from what's happening to him right now, and for a good part of this scene. Gus is livid, but is silently making calculated movements, not displaying any of that anger until he kills Victor. He doesn't speak for the entirety of this scene, just kind of methodically moving around the lab. He already knows what he's going to do. He made up his mind 10 minutes ago. But the other characters, and up until this point the audience, have no clue what he's going to do here. He reveals nothing. Finally, there's Victor, who's just kind of highlighting a big part of the reason that he would have to be killed anyway. He's becoming far too cocky and overstepping his place as a simple henchman to Fring. Unlike Walter Jesse, though, he is completely dispensable, since his role could likely be filled by any number of criminals. Talented chemists, as I mentioned, may not fall out of the sky, but common, somewhat skilled criminals certainly do. And Jesse can't be killed because then they don't have Walt anyway. Now, Victor obviously isn't expecting to be murdered right here and now, and honestly doesn't seem to be expecting it at all, but he also just doesn't seem to know when to shut up or seem to care that he also messed up in a huge way, having been spotted at Gale's apartment. He's stepping out of line as well, telling Gus that he's been watching Walt cook for weeks and claiming to know every step of Walt's cooks. Back to Walter, though. Like many moments in this show, he's desperate to string the right choice of words together that's going to prevent Gus from killing him. But honestly, he just starts spewing a bunch of nonsense. He's so helpless here that he just starts saying anything that he thinks might work. He calls Victor a short-order fry cook. He starts questioning him on what to do during certain weather conditions or humidity, and then he starts rattling off a bunch of complex science behind meth cooking. Walter, pretty poetically, is cut off when Gus grabs the box cutter from the drawer. His arrogance with Victor slips away, and he begins to stutter and fall over his words once he and us, the audience, see Gus slide the blade out. Walter is thrown off and back to being completely terrified. Even Mike's reaction here changes now, shifting his eyes between both Gus and Walt, still unsure of what exactly is happening here. An important thing to note, and one of the greatest parts of this scene, is that we are shown this box cutter before Gus uses it here. In a flashback, it's actually Gale who uses it first to open up boxes of equipment in the super lab when it was still new. This is a narrative principle that is commonly referred to as Chekhov's gun. For those who don't know, this states that every element that the writer draws attention to should be used later in the narrative. Like, if a character early in the story takes note of a gun on the wall, later during a confrontation, they'll use it to defend themselves. This Chekhov's box cutter is used by Gale to excitedly unpack lab equipment, and then later by Gus to brutally murder someone. Both of these actions happen with the exact same tool in the exact same setting. There's a great deal of significance here that I feel gets overlooked completely. This emphasizes the duality of the business that Walter and Jesse have gotten themselves into. There's the exciting aspect of creating meth in a pristine lab with high-tech equipment and making a ton of money, but also looming behind that is the truth of the business. It is an illegal, brutal, and in this case very literally, cutthroat business that they are involved with now. The lab may look and feel completely professional and safe like a normal job, but it's built upon and surrounded by the violent world of drug cartels and criminals. There's even more symbolic meaning to the box cutter because in a lot of ways, both Gale and Gus use it in this episode to open various things up. In a direct and literal sense, Gale is opening boxes of lab equipment and Gus is opening up Victor's throat. Those are things that are physically opened, but there are more things beyond a surface level that are figuratively being opened. In the flashback scene, for both Gale and Gus, this box cutter is opening them up to opportunity and excitement. Gale gets an opportunity to fulfill his passion for chemistry in a state-of-the-art lab and become immensely wealthy doing it. Gus, similarly, is able to finally set in motion long-standing plans of wealth and revenge. In the scene that's the subject of this analysis, the box cutter is used to open Walter and Jesse's eyes to the brutal reality of their current situation. Gus is the one who is in control, and he is a violent, gruesome person who will not hesitate to dispose of anyone who steps out of line. It's a brutal warning meant to open their eyes to who's really in control here and who Gus Fring really is. One thing that I've always appreciated about this scene is that it's gore with a purpose, not just for gore's sake. You see it often in media, especially now, where a scene will have a super gory moment that's purely for shock value with no substance behind it. That is not the case in this scene because the brutality helps reveal Gus's true nature. He is not just the calm, composed businessman that the characters and the audience have seen thus far. He is also capable of being a horrifying and violent killer. After Gus picks the box cutter up and begins walking toward Walter and Jesse, we see his shadow wash over them just before he's back on camera again, like a wave of darkness and evil that's slowly approaching them. He is literally looming over them, like his shadow, as an imposing dark presence. Gus also approaches Walt and Jesse, staring them down, similar to a predator that's sizing up its prey. He's clutching the box cutter like he's ready to use it at any moment on them, which further emphasizes just how unnerving this scene really is. The camera work in this scene is also incredible, and it shines particularly here. As Gus approaches, the camera angle switches to an overhead shot that is looking down on the characters. Often in film, and very likely in this scene, this is done to make characters seem small, vulnerable, inferior, trapped, or to emphasize a power imbalance. Walter and Jesse are all of the above at this moment, as they are trapped in the lab, vulnerable, while Gus displays his power and control over them. When Walt says, "You killed Jesse, you don't have me," I interpreted Jesse's reaction to hearing this in a couple of different ways. It could be that he's surprised that Walter cares enough about him to say this, but alternatively, it could also be that the mention of him being killed, combined with Gus's closeness to him, snapped him back to reality, and he's now fully capable of realizing the situation that he's currently in. We do see in this scene that despite his blank expression, Jesse has been eyeing up the box cutter and Gus. This makes me inclined to believe his reaction here is more the latter. Walter continues this by saying, "You won't do this. You're too smart. You can't afford to do this. Please let us just go back to work. We're here. Let us work. We're ready to go to work. We'll just pick this up right where we left off." This specific string of dialogue to me seems to perfectly display, albeit slightly out of order, 4 of the 5 stages of grief that were developed by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, those being denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. "You won't do this, you're too smart, and you can't afford to do this," are all Walter being in denial. Then we see him begin to bargain with Gus, telling him to let them go back to work and transitioning into anger, raising his voice and saying, "We're ready to go to work." Then he finally sinks into his depression, just sadly saying, "We'll just pick up right where we left off." As mentioned, though, one of the 5 stages is notably missing, that being acceptance. Walter White is completely incapable of acceptance throughout the entirety of the show, and here it is highlighted so perfectly. I mean, even from the beginning of the series, we see Walter refuse to accept numerous things, like accepting help from others, accepting mistakes and the consequences that come with them, accepting that what he is doing, he's not doing for his family, and admitting it's just for himself. These are just a few of many examples, but in this scene, we see his refusal of acceptance play out in real time, with him not owning his mistakes or the reality of this situation. Another super interesting aspect of the production of this scene is the choice of lighting. To start, Mike here is literally kept in the dark. What I mean by this is that for the entirety of the scene, Mike is standing out of the light and in darkness. There are 2 interpretations of this that I believe to both be true. Mike is in the dark here because he has no idea what Gus's current plan is. As I mentioned briefly throughout this analysis, Mike may have thoughts about how Gus is going to handle this situation, but he isn't in the loop like he normally is. We see this throughout the scene, but especially during his reaction to Victor's murder, which I will get into later. The other is that, similar to the Half Measures monologue, Mike is in the dark here because he's on the side of evil. Despite not knowing exactly what's going on, he is still complicit with Gus's decision. He knows that Walter and Jesse should probably be taken out here, and that Victor has essentially signed his death warrant since he was spotted at the scene of Gail's murder. He may have thought that they would be disposed of in at least a somewhat humane manner, but he was perfectly okay with them being killed, even likely being pretty okay with doing it himself. The lighting and framing of Gus is even more incredible in this scene. When Gus kills Victor, he is under the lab lighting in such a way that it looks like a spotlight on a stage. Now, Victor was going to be killed for a number of reasons, primarily his appearance at Gail's apartment, but, as mentioned prior, he could have been killed in a far more humane way. He chose to kill Victor brutally and slowly with the box cutter rather than quickly with a gun. He chose to kill him with an audience, having Mike, Walt, and Jesse present. He chose to specifically be the one to kill him and to get his hands dirty. Gus kills him in this setting and in this way as a show of his ruthlessness and control. For all intents and purposes, this is a show. He may as well be on a stage because the way he kills Victor is meant to be a performance. This idea is furthered by Gus standing in front of Victor before killing him, rather than behind him. Even though it would be far more practical to kill him from behind, he opts to stand in front of Victor. While it does just ultimately add to the surprise of the scene, I think there's more here. Gus is making absolutely certain that their attention is on him for this. He has already had their full attention, sure, but this is like a conductor standing in front of a crowd before leading an orchestra and putting on a show. Victor's murder is a demonstration of what happens if you fall out of line, and he wants it to be a perfectly clear one. There are brutal and horrific consequences to not obeying him. Without words, he is telling Walt, Jesse, and even to a degree Mike, just how powerless they are in comparison to him. He stares down Walt, Jesse, and Mike without breaking eye contact. The entire time, Victor is helplessly struggling and fighting to stay alive. During this, there is a notable but brief exchange between Gus and Jesse. Jesse leans forward in his chair and looks not away from Gus, but right at him. His look doesn't seem to be one of fear, but anger. Gus notices this and responds with a very subtle, slight tilt of his head that seems to be displaying a range of different emotions. For the most part here, it's a look that says, "Do you see what you've caused? This could have been you just as easily." He also could be annoyed that this intimidation tactic didn't have exactly the desired effect on Jesse that he was hoping for. Unlike Walt, after the initial shock of what Gus just did is over with, Jesse doesn't turn away or avert his eyes. He just spent the greater part of 24 hours racked with guilt over taking a life, and Gus does it so effortlessly and violently that Jesse's disgusted. Instead of cowering away at this message from Gus, he literally and figuratively leans in not only to tell Gus that he received it loud and clear, but that he won't be rattled. This leads to the third feeling that Gus seems to be displaying here. He's impressed. If even ever so slightly, Jesse's response impresses Gus and shows him that maybe Jesse isn't just some junkie like he initially thought. There's potential here that Gus clocks, and this will inform his actions later on in the series with regards to Jesse. This scene alone really fast-tracks Jesse's growth as a character, and I think this exchange solidifies that. Mike's reaction is also extremely distinct, because we very rarely ever see Mike genuinely frightened or worried throughout Breaking Bad. He's so caught off guard and scared here that he actually draws his gun on Gus out of pure instinct. These are likely instincts from when he was a cop, where he sees an assailant draw a weapon and kill. Compulsively, he's going to draw his gun and take out the threat in the room to protect people and himself. I've mentioned it throughout the analysis, but Mike had no idea what Gus was going to do. Sure, he knew Victor was going to be killed, but it was the way that Gus killed him. The shock and the brutality of this action surprises even him. So why wouldn't Gus tell Mike he was going to do this? Well, there's multiple reasons I think he wouldn't. For starters, Mike would have never approved of taking out Victor like this, as he's super loyal to his guys, and thus it would have just caused Gus more headache than he was willing to put up with at that point. Also, this was a warning to Walt and Jesse, sure, but I think what a lot of people miss is that this was also directed at Mike. Mike made a misstep in allowing Walt the phone call that alerted Jesse to kill Gale. Gus would not have permitted him that call or even allowed Mike to do so if he was present, so Mike made a decision outside of Gus's orders. Gus is showing all three of them that anyone is dispensable and can be killed or replaced at any time if he deems it necessary. Gus drops Victor's bloody, lifeless body and walks away, also dropping the box cutter to the floor. If Victor's murder was a performance on a stage, this moment is the mic drop, the bow, and the curtain call at the end of the performance. There is also some significance to the low-angle shot of Gus stepping past Victor's lifeless body. We see Gus's foot step on Victor's head on the floor. Not literally, but from the camera angle. This serves to further show that all of these people are beneath him, and that he will step over, past, or on anyone if it means that he will achieve his greater goals. Gus also pretty poetically drops Victor's corpse at Walter's feet. His death can be directly attributed to Walter, because while Gus did the actual killing, it was Walter's chain of events that led to a point where his death became a necessity. Gus cleans himself up and leaves the lab, having said so much without uttering a single word, and the scene concludes with Victor's blood pooling at Walter's feet. We see Walt desperately try to keep the blood from touching his shoes, visibly still shaken by the whole thing. No matter what he does, though, the blood continues to flow quickly toward him. He's also already stained with Victor's blood anyway, a consequence of his ego, manipulation, and ignorance of who Gus Fring really is. Victor is just one of the many bodies that Walter White will leave behind in his wake. If you've made it this far into the video, that means you watched till the end, so I would just like to sincerely thank you for watching. These videos are a passion project of mine, especially the Why This Scene series, so I'm incredibly grateful that you took time out of your day to tune in. The response to my episode discussing Mike's half-measure monologue, as well as other recent content, was overwhelmingly positive, and if you stuck around from that video, welcome back. If you're new here, though, please consider subscribing and liking the video, as that would mean the world to me, and it's also the best way to show me that you'd like to see more. Also, please do feel free to comment with your interpretations, theories, feedback, or really just kind of anything, because I love to read it and respond to whoever I can. I have a lot of different ideas for videos, and I'm super excited for particularly this series, so I can't wait to show them all to you. Once again, and above all else, thank you. I'm really glad you enjoyed, and I hope to see you around here in the future. That's pretty much all I had to say, so see you in the next one. Peace.